In the heart of Arizona, where the red deserts breathe with heat and silence, and the stars hang like ancient watchers in the sky, lies a secret buried in stone. Tonight I will take you on a journey, not just through geography or history, but through a story passed down in whispers, a legend carved into the very bones of the earth, hidden inside a place so quiet, so still, that even time seems reluctant to disturb it. This is the tale of the Apache Death Cave, but don't let the name stir fear in your heart. Let it stir curiosity, because before darkness ever fell within those cavern walls, there was light and life, and a tribe whose fate became woven into this haunted land. We begin not in the depths of the cave, but just above it. Imagine the sun has just sunk below the horizon. The sky is a mix of lavender and deepening indigo. A soft breeze rustles through the brittle sagebrush, carrying the scent of dust and ancient stone. The desert is vast, quiet, and hauntingly beautiful. In the distance, a few scattered cacti stand like sentinels. The land around you rolls gently, scattered with boulders that seem to remember stories older than memory. You're walking beside a shallow ravine, at first glance just another crack in the desert floor. But this one is different. You stop. The air feels heavier here. The rock seems to whisper. The shadows are deeper than they should be. That's when you notice it, a narrow slit in the stone, partially hidden behind a cluster of brush. It's a natural cave opening, barely wider than a doorway, descending into the earth like a forgotten wound. This is it, the entrance to the Apache Death Cave. But before we step inside, let's go back. Back before this place had such a chilling name, before the whispers, before the curse. The year was 1878. Northern Arizona was a harsh and unforgiving place. Long stretches of desert were broken only by jagged rock formations and distant buttes. Here, the Navajo and Apache peoples moved with the seasons, living close to the land. But peace was fragile. The Apache tribe in this story was a small band, fierce, agile, and independent. Their warriors rode fast horses and knew the canyons like the lines in their hands. They followed the stars, the wind, and the tracks of deer through lands both sacred and dangerous. That spring, conflict had flared again between the Apaches and the Navajo. Old wounds reopened, raids grew more frequent, and in the heat of this growing tension, one group of Apache warriors struck a blow that would echo across generations. They raided a nearby Navajo settlement, taking what they could and vanishing before dawn. Supplies, horses, even a few hostages. The Navajo, in mourning and fury, followed. And so the chase began. The Apaches retreated west toward the land that would soon betray them. The desert stretched wide, offering no protection from the hot sun or the anger behind them. By the third day, they needed a place to hide, rest, regroup. That's when they found it. The cave, cool, quiet, hidden. A perfect place to disappear. But the desert has ears, and stone remembers everything. What happened next has been passed down in different ways. Some say the Navajo tracked them there. Others say a whispering wind gave them away. Either way, the cave would become a tomb. But we're not there yet. Right now, it's just a cave, just a hiding place, just rock and dust and silence. The Apaches led their horses inside, made camp within the darkness, and tended their wounds. They believed they were safe, that the shadows would protect them. But legends have a way of forming at the crossroads of tragedy and time, and by the time the sun rose again, the air outside that cave would never be the same. For now we pause at the threshold. The wind is still. The stars have brightened. A lizard darts across a rock. Somewhere far off, an owl cries into the night. The desert has stories, and you're just beginning to hear one of its oldest. So breathe deep. Let your mind drift into the hush of history, because the cave is waiting, and it remembers everything. The stars had barely shifted overhead when the Apaches, hidden within the cave, began to hear the distant echoes of horses. Somewhere out there, in the endless black between moonlight and mesa, someone was coming. Inside the cave, the warriors held their breath. Silence, like a heavy curtain, fell over them. Even the horses seemed to understand. Not a snort, not a step, only the low whisper of wind at the cave mouth. Outside, the desert night stretched across the land like a giant sleeping beast. No clouds, no firelight, just the creeping cold and the flicker of 1,000 stars watching from above. The Apaches had been hunted before. They were used to the rhythm of pursuit, the echo of hooves, the brief clash of steel, the taste of dust in dry mouths. But this was different. They had never hidden like this, never waited in the darkness of the earth itself, unsure if the enemy had found their trail. In their hearts they knew what the Navajo were capable of. The Apache warriors respected their enemies, fierce, clever, relentless. If the Navajo were close, they would not stop until justice was served. Days passed. The cave was deep. Narrow tunnels twisted like veins through the sandstone. Some led to empty chambers. Others dropped into steep, echoing hollows. There was little light. The men lit small fires when needed, careful to keep the smoke from rising to the surface. One elder among them spoke of spirits. He said this cave was older than the tribes, older than the bones buried in the canyons, that places like this were sacred or cursed. But the warriors dismissed him. The cave was just a hiding place, a shelter. What they didn't know was that the Navajo were closer than they thought. The trackers had found signs, a snapped branch, a hoofprint half buried in dust, the faint trace of smoke on the wind. Each clue led them west, then north, then down toward the broken lands where the cave lay hidden. One scout climbed a rocky bluff and looked across the horizon. There, far below, he saw the faintest curl of something, a distortion in the air near the ground. Heat, smoke, or breath from the earth. They moved quickly now, silent, shadows on horseback. Below, in the cave, the Apache had grown restless. Rations were low. Water was nearly gone. The horses grew anxious in the tight space. Some wanted to leave under cover of night. Others insisted they wait one more day. Just one more. That one more day would cost them everything. The Navajo arrived at dawn. They didn't rush in. They waited. They knew something the Apaches didn't. That caves can trap more than secrets. They can trap men and smoke. The next part of the story is whispered like a prayer or a warning. The Navajo gathered sagebrush and dry wood. They piled it near the cave mouth, lit the first flame. The smoke was thick, bitter, black. It rolled into the cave like a living thing. Inside, the Apaches panicked. The smoke moved fast, chasing oxygen from the narrow halls. Horses reared, men stumbled. The fire wasn't in the cave, but it didn't need to be. The air became poison. One by one, the warriors fell. Some tried to crawl toward the mouth, only to find more smoke and fire. Others tried to retreat deeper, hoping for another exit. There wasn't one. By sunset, the cave was quiet again. Too quiet. The Navajo stood at the mouth, staring into the black. Some say they sang a mourning song, not for the dead, but for the land itself. That day, vengeance had been served, but something sacred had been broken too. And so the cave was sealed. Rocks were rolled into the entrance. Fires were left to smolder. The wind, once curious, turned cold. From that day forward, the place was no longer just a cave. It became legend. A place where no one camped, where no animals lingered, where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The Apache death cave had been born, and it would never sleep again. The cave was silent again. But silence doesn't mean peace. Not in this land. Days passed, then weeks. The fire long extinguished. The desert wind returned. It howled through the ravines and swept over the sealed cave as if trying to erase what had happened. But this land, it doesn't forget. The Navajo people moved on, but they didn't return to the cave. They avoided it. They spoke of it only in low tones, when the night was thick and the stars burned especially bright. The elders said that such places were never meant to hold the living or the dead. In time, settlers came to the region. Wagon wheels creaked through the dust. New maps were drawn. New names were given to rivers, buttes, and stone. And still, no one touched the cave. Animals avoided it. Even the wind seemed to slow near the entrance, as though cautious of what might still breathe below. But curiosity has a long memory. And one day, long after the tribes had left the region, a man came to the canyon. A stranger, an outsider. And he found the sealed mouth of the cave. He wasn't a warrior or a hunter. He was an explorer, driven by rumor, not revenge. Locals warned him, said the place was haunted, said bones lay beneath the stone, untouched for decades. But the man had heard stories of gold hidden inside, stashed by fleeing warriors. Gold does strange things to men. He returned with tools, shovels, lanterns, a stubborn sense of purpose. And he dug. Day after day, the entrance was slowly reopened. Stones rolled back, dust spilled into the canyon air. Finally, the cave mouth gaped open again, after so many years. He stepped inside. The explorer was alone. The light from his lantern flickered on rough, blood-colored walls. The air was cool. Still, too still. He walked cautiously, marking the path with chalk. The cave twisted deeper into darkness so thick it felt alive. The silence pressed against his ears like water. That's when he found them. Bones, scattered across the floor, human and horse, some still half-cloaked in fragments of decayed leather and cloth. There were broken weapons, crumbled bags, and the blackened remains of old fires. He paused, staring at the remains of a forgotten battle. And though he was no superstitious man, he felt it. That cold ripple along his spine. That sense of being watched by something older than ghosts. He lit more lanterns. The light pushed back the shadows, but not all of them. He set to searching. Gold, he believed, must be here. Why else would men risk such a cave? But what he found instead was a story, etched in bones and silence. And as he moved deeper, the cave itself seemed to shift. Tunnels twisted. Paths disappeared behind him. The air thickened. His chalk marks smudged. The cave was not empty. Not entirely. He began to hear things, soft whispers, faint movements like footsteps just beyond the firelight. A distant sound of a horse snorting, though none lived down here. He called out. No answer. He turned back. The entrance was gone. In a panic, he dropped his lantern. It shattered, flames hissing on stone. Darkness rushed in like a tide. His breath echoed off the walls. He stumbled, searching the tunnel. For hours he wandered, shouting, clawing, whispering apologies to no one. And then, a faint light, not his lantern, not fire, moonlight. Somehow the cave had released him. He crawled out into the cold desert night, pale, shaking, and changed. He never spoke of what he saw, not in full. Only a few words written in a journal found years later. There are places in this world that are not meant to be opened. The cave breathes, it remembers. After that, no one dared reopen it again. The entrance was sealed with concrete, marked with warnings. But at night, if you stand quietly at the edge of the canyon, you might still hear something, a low breath, a distant hoofbeat, a whisper, waiting to be heard. The explorer never spoke again of what truly happened inside the Apache death cave. Not to his friends, not to the newspapers that came knocking, and certainly not to the historians who wanted to catalog bones like trophies. But something about him had changed. His hands trembled when he lit a candle. His eyes often wandered, searching corners where shadows pooled. He never ventured into the wilderness again. The cave had marked him. And so the tale began to drift into folklore again, not as a mere legend of vengeance, but as something more, something haunted, something alive. Locals told stories. Tourists came, then left quickly, unsettled, though they couldn't say why. Children dared each other to approach the canyon, only to run screaming before reaching the edge. The land had not forgotten, but the world beyond it was beginning to forget. Years passed, decades. A highway was built miles away. A gas station sprouted near the canyon, its glowing sign flickering under the desert stars. Convenience crept closer to silence, but even so, the cave resisted. Then, one night, a drifter came walking through the desert. He was thin, worn, the kind of man whose past was a puzzle of missing pieces. He had heard rumors, just like the explorer before him. Rumors of treasure, of ghosts, of a cave that breathed. He ignored the warnings scratched onto the stone posts near the old sealed entrance. He didn't believe in curses or spirits. He believed in luck. With nothing but a flashlight and a pack, he pried open the stones that sealed the mouth. He crawled inside, and the cave welcomed him. For a while, he moved deeper than the explorer had dared, through tight crevices, past chambers filled with brittle bones, deeper into parts untouched since that smoke-filled day. But the deeper he went, the stranger it became. The air didn't just feel still, it felt thick, wet, heavy, like he was walking through fog he couldn't see. His flashlight flickered, then dimmed. Then something spoke. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. Not words. It was a memory, a feeling, a breath against the skin of his soul. Regret, anger, loneliness. The very rock whispered with the pain of a tribe buried alive. He stumbled, fell against the stone. His hands landed in ash and something warm. But when he opened his eyes, he saw no light, no fire. Only darkness. The cave didn't want him to leave. He ran. He ran blind, scraping his limbs on jagged walls, crawling through the tight places, calling out for light. He dropped his pack, lost his boots, left pieces of himself in that tunnel, until, at last, a crack of dawn, light, and freedom. He crawled out like a man reborn, covered in dust, blood, and silence. He never returned. But he did one thing that others had not. He told his story, not to frighten, but to warn. And his words, written in a dusty notebook found at an old roadside diner, became legend again. There is sorrow in that cave, he wrote. Not just death, not just spirits, but sorrow. It remembers what was taken from it, and it does not want to be forgotten. So now the story has come to you, as the wind whistles through your window, as the sky turns black outside, as the stars begin to shimmer like ancient eyes watching. You too have entered the cave, but don't be afraid. Just listen. Long after the drifter vanished into the quiet folds of the desert, long after his notebook was found and passed along in whispers, the cave remained, still, unchanged, and yet, waiting. People began to ask different questions about the place, not about gold or curses or even ghosts, but about memory. What if the cave was not haunted by angry spirits, but by stories? Stories no one had finished telling. You see, every land holds memory. The wind remembers songs, the stone remembers fire, and caves, those dark places between worlds, remember voices. In the Apache death cave, those voices have never truly gone silent. Some say if you listen long enough inside the outer chamber, you'll hear a flute, not played by wind, not carried by echoes, but something softer, sadder, a melody broken like a prayer that's lost its words. Others say they've heard footsteps, bare feet on sand-covered stone, following behind them, only to find no one there. But the most unsettling stories come from those who claim to have spoken with someone inside. Not a ghost, not a vision, but a boy. A child's voice barely above a whisper. "Don't forget us," he says. That's all. No threat, no malice, just a simple plea that drifts like smoke through the corridors. Don't forget us, so let's not. Let's go back, just for a moment, not to the death, but to the life that came before the smoke, before the chase, before the cave took their breath. There was a tribe, a people, mothers who hummed lullabies beneath the moon, children who ran barefoot between red rocks, warriors who sang to the stars before battle. There was laughter in those canyons once. The Apache did not just live here. They belonged here. The land was not just something they walked across. It was something they spoke to. Every tree had a name. Every stream had a song. Every stone held a secret. And when they buried their dead, they buried them with words, stories, names, promises. So when we tell this tale, we are not just repeating a legend. We are honoring a memory that still echoes through stone. The bones in that cave are not trophies. They are not mysteries to be solved. They are pages from a book that was torn, burned, scattered, and left unfinished. And so the boy whispers again, just behind your shoulder now. Don't forget us. The cave doesn't want revenge. It wants remembrance. It wants someone, anyone, to sit beside it and listen, not to the screams, not to the fear, but to the story it never got to finish telling. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, as the shadows dance across your walls, and the desert wind finds your window from 1,000 miles away, know that you're hearing more than just a story. After the stories had faded again into the folds of time, after the cave's entrance was sealed and the land grew quiet once more, something strange began to happen in the desert. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was there. Travelers passing near the canyon would feel it first, a shift in the air, a silence that felt too complete, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. Some called it superstition, others shrugged it off as nerves, but those who stayed long enough, who camped under the cliffs or walked the ridges alone, would describe something they couldn't explain. The feeling of being watched, not by animals, not by people, but by the land itself. The sun still shone, the winds still blew, but something beneath the desert surface had awakened again. Or perhaps it had simply been waiting. Locals told stories of strange dreams that came when sleeping too close to the cave. Dreams of fire, of smoke, of stone corridors that shifted like mazes. In these dreams there were always footsteps, echoing but never catching up, and always a voice. "You found us," it would say. "Now listen." Some who heard these stories laughed, others leaned in, but no one who heard them forgot. One man, a photographer passing through on a cross-country trip, decided to investigate. He had read about the cave online, the legends, the whispers. And on a golden afternoon, with the sun dipping low, he parked his van near the edge of the canyon and hiked out alone. He didn't go inside. The cave's entrance was still blocked with thick concrete and warning signs. But he stood there and listened. No wind, no birds, no buzz of desert insects, just stillness. He raised his camera and took a picture. The instant the shutter clicked, a gust of wind burst from nowhere, ripping across the ridge, knocking his hat from his head, and pushing him back a full step. But the wind wasn't cold. It was warm, like breath. He lowered his camera, heart thudding. When he looked at the image later, there was nothing there, no figures, no shadows. And yet, the picture felt different. The light wasn't quite right. The colors were muted as though filtered through time, and far in the background, barely visible, a shape, human-sized, standing among the rocks. He never returned, but the image became famous online. The Watcher in the Canyon, it was called. Skeptics called it a trick of light, a lens flare. But others knew. The land remembers. And the cave watches, not to harm, but to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Because some places aren't haunted by ghosts. They are haunted by silence. And the longer that silence remains, the louder it echoes beneath the earth. Stories have a strange way of surviving. Even when buried beneath dust, rock, and silence, they find their way back to the surface. Sometimes it happens in a whisper from an old man at a diner. Sometimes in a photograph shared online. Sometimes in the flicker of a memory someone never lived, but somehow remembers. And sometimes in a dream. The Apache Death Cave, once forgotten, sealed, and silent, is no longer unknown. In recent years, it's become the subject of articles, ghost hunting videos, blog posts, and road trip diaries. But few know the full story. Most only skim the surface. Haunted cave, Native American legend, burned warriors, revenge. They read a paragraph, maybe two, then they scroll on. But the cave wants more than that. It wants patience. It wants your breath to slow, your eyes to soften, your spirit to listen. Because what happened there wasn't just horror, it was heartbreak. In the small towns near the canyon, there are elders, both Apache and Navajo, who still remember. Not because they were there, but because the memory was passed to them like an ember in a bowl of stone. These elders don't speak of curses. They speak of grief. One woman, gray-haired and soft-voiced, shared a tale she was told as a child. The cave, she said, was never evil. It simply held the weight of what happened. And sometimes, when a place holds pain for too long, it begins to dream. That line stuck with me. What if the cave dreams? Not with images or sound, but with memory. Imagine being the earth. Watching time move above you, hearing footsteps, screams, silence, then dust, then forgetfulness. Imagine holding bones that once danced, hands that once painted under starlight, hearts that once loved deeply, and then lost everything in smoke. Of course, the cave remembers. And slowly, across the internet, through word of mouth and in midnight conversations between curious souls, the cave begins to live again. Artists sketch it, writers imagine it, children dare each other to look up its name online, and each retelling, no matter how imperfect, breathes life into the memory. I read once that remembrance is the most powerful form of healing, that to speak of something lost is to carry it forward, not as a burden, but as a song. So maybe the cave no longer needs to frighten. Maybe now it needs only to be seen, to be understood, to be felt. I once met a man on a hiking trail not far from the canyon. He wasn't a ghost hunter or thrill seeker. He was a poet. He had come from out of state, holding nothing but a notebook and a map someone had mailed him years before. He said he didn't believe in spirits, but he believed in silence, and what silence can say if you sit with it long enough. The land has a rhythm, he told me. If you walk slowly enough, it becomes music. He never entered the cave, but he sat near it every sunrise for 5 mornings. On the 5th day, he wrote a single line in his notebook. The cave is not a wound. It is a mouth still waiting to speak. That line, like so many, stayed with me. I think that's why we're here, why you're hearing this now, because maybe you're meant to carry the memory too. Not as a ghost story, not as a warning, but as a thread. A golden line stretching through time, connecting voices that once sang under desert skies with the ears of those who are willing to listen tonight. You are not in the cave now. You are in your room, or in your bed, or on a quiet walk beneath the stars. But part of you is there, and part of the cave is here with you. That's how stories work. They move through space without footsteps. They slip between dreams and waking. They light candles in the dark. So if tomorrow someone asks you why you look a little more thoughtful, or why your eyes seem just a touch more reflective, you can tell them, "Last night I listened to a place where memory sleeps beneath the earth." And if they laugh or shrug, that's okay. Not everyone hears the same echoes, but you heard them, and tonight, that's enough. There's a truth that storytellers rarely speak aloud, but the cave knows it. Every time you share a story, especially one born from sorrow, you carry part of it inside you, and in doing so, you become responsible for it. Not to change it, not to claim it, but to protect it. That is the role of the memory keeper. And now, you are one. The Apache Death Cave is no longer just a location marked on forgotten maps or ghost hunting forums. It is a living place, not because its soil shifts or its rocks move, but because people are listening again. People like you, and others, quiet ones, who sit under the desert moon, their fingers tracing ancient carvings, their eyes closed, listening for voices long gone. In a small Apache museum miles from the canyon, a room has been dedicated to what they call the last fire. It holds no bones, no weapons, no gold, just a single stone, smooth, black, warm to the touch. Rescued from the mouth of the cave by a tribal elder before the concrete was poured over it. The stone is not labeled with a long plaque. There is no dramatic explanation. Only 4 words carved softly into the wooden frame above it. We will remember you. Visitors come and go. Children press their hands to the glass, confused but curious. And sometimes, if the room is quiet, a museum guide will tell the story, gently, like it's a song passed down from the wind. They do not speak of curses. They do not glorify the fire. They speak of a people who deserve to be remembered. This is the beginning of healing, because remembrance is not about looking backward with sorrow. It's about looking forward with reverence. The poet who visited the canyon, he published a small chapbook of verses titled The Cave That Dreamed. It sold only a few copies, but one of them made its way into the hands of a young girl, half Navajo, half Apache, growing up far from the land her ancestors once walked. She read the poems each night before bed, and one day she decided she wanted to visit the cave, not to take photos or post online, but to sit quietly and listen. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Her parents brought her to the canyon at dawn. The sky was painted in soft peach and lavender. The girl sat alone at the sealed entrance. She closed her eyes and waited. She didn't hear ghosts or footsteps or cries. What she heard was a drum beat, faint, steady, like a heartbeat inside stone. And in her heart she whispered, "I remember you." She didn't need to speak it aloud. The land heard. The wind curled gently around her shoulders. A single lizard crept from the rocks, then paused, watching. A small desert flower, almost invisible against the red sand, tilted its bloom toward the sky. She stayed only 10 minutes. Then she stood, placed her hand against the concrete seal, and walked back to her family. That night she wrote her own poem. Only 2 lines. I sat by the cave of the last breath. It did not weep. It listened. You see, the cave doesn't need us to mourn forever. It needs us to listen and pass it on. And in that passing, in that honoring, in that quiet remembering, we become something new. Not just listeners, not just dreamers, but memory keepers. And now it is your turn. Carry this with care, not as a ghost story, but as a promise. Not all stories end in fire. Some end in silence, not the silence of forgetting, but the silence of understanding. And silence, when chosen, becomes sacred. That is what has become of the Apache Death Cave. It is no longer just a tragedy carved in sandstone. It is no longer a rumor on dusty forums or a ghost tale told to tourists at roadside diners. It is something older now, something returned to the land. In recent years, a quiet movement began, led not by governments or corporations, but by descendants, children of the Apache, grandchildren of the Navajo, artists, elders, and quiet thinkers who understood that the cave did not need to be reopened. It needed to be reclaimed, not as a spectacle, not as a danger, but as a place of healing. One spring morning, 7 people gathered at the canyon rim. They brought no cameras, no lights, no shovels, only cloth, feathers, clay, and the songs of their people. They did not enter the cave. Instead, they formed a circle near the sealed entrance, and in that circle they sang. Old songs, sacred ones, songs that had not been heard aloud in over 100 years. No audience, no applause. Only canyon walls and wind. One by one, each person placed an offering at the base of the stone seal, a woven bracelet, a clay turtle, a feather from a red-tailed hawk. Each item placed gently, with closed eyes and quiet breath. When the songs were finished, they did not speak. They simply sat, together, not mourning, not reliving, just being. And the land listened. Overhead, the sky opened into the deepest blue. A hawk circled once. The wind curled around the stones like smoke from an old fire. And the cave did not breathe. It exhaled. A warm gust pushed gently outward through the sealed cracks, lifting dust from the feet of the circle. The group did not flinch. They nodded. And one of them, a soft-spoken man with lines carved into his cheeks by sun and sorrow, whispered, "You are home again." They left nothing behind but the offerings and a feeling. Visitors who come now, quiet ones, the respectful kind, say they can feel it before they see the cave. A gentleness, like walking into the presence of something ancient that has chosen to forgive. The stories still live here, but they don't burn anymore. They hum, like a lullaby you've heard before, but only in dreams. It's said that the girl from before, the one who sat alone at the sunrise, returned many years later. Now a grown woman, her hair streaked with silver, her voice deeper, her eyes softer. She brought her own daughter this time, and once more they sat together by the cave. No words, just fingers gently clasped, heads tilted toward the wind, and silence, not the silence of death, but the silence of peace. You see, some stories are meant to end in quiet, because in quiet we remember most clearly, and in memory the circle is closed, not to shut out the pain, but to hold it, gently, like a fragile flame that once burned too hot, but now glows softly in the dark. In every corner of this earth, there are places that hum quietly through time, not loud, not visible, but steady. They don't cry out for attention. They don't roar. They whisper. The Apache Death Cave is one of those places. But perhaps now that name no longer fits. Because this is not a story about death anymore. It never truly was. This is a story about remembrance. about what it means to carry the past not as a burden, but as a breath, gentle, sacred, unbroken. Beneath the layers of sandstone, beneath the sealed stone and the silence, something has remained alive all along. A heartbeat, a memory, a promise. And now, through your listening, through your imagining, through your caring, you have become part of it. Think of that. You, wherever you are right now, in a quiet room, beneath soft blankets, or walking slowly beneath the moonlight, you have walked the canyon paths. You've stood before the sealed mouth of memory, and you've heard it speak. The cave no longer holds just bones. It holds voices, not screaming, not haunting, but humming, gently, like wind over stone, and that hum now lives in you. The child who once whispered, "Don't forget us," no longer needs to ask. You haven't forgotten. And as long as someone remembers, the story continues, not in tragedy, but in love. Love for a people who lived, love for a land that holds their footprints, love for silence that carries meaning more powerful than words. Perhaps one day someone will ask you about this story. Maybe a child will notice the quiet look in your eyes and say, "What are you thinking about?" And maybe you'll smile. Maybe you'll say, "I was remembering a cave in the desert where the wind once wept and the earth once healed." And if that child listens closely, if they close their eyes and let the story wash over them, the cave will breathe again. That is how sacred places survive, not through fame, not through signs, but through connection. A connection that stretches from firelight to satellite, from ancient drums to digital dreams, from the hush of stone to the hush of bedtime. And now we come to the final breath. Let us leave the canyon with care. Step gently across the sand. Feel the warmth of the last light on your skin. Look back one final time at the place that welcomed you not with fear, but with truth. There is a legend, whispered only by the oldest among the elders, that once every 100 years, when the desert wind carries no dust and the sky holds no stars, the cave opens, not physically, but spiritually. And for a single moment, the breath of stone becomes visible, a shimmer, a wave of warmth, a soft rhythm pulsing through the earth itself. Not everyone sees it, not everyone feels it, but those who do are changed, not cursed, not haunted, just awakened. Awakened to the deep, ancient knowledge that memory is not a thing we visit. It is a thing we become. So now, dear listener, close your eyes. Let the silence wash over you. Let the cave fade from view. Let the story settle into your breath like a final exhale before sleep. And if you dream tonight, may you dream of redstone cliffs under silver light. May you walk paths carved by wind and time. May you sit beside spirits who no longer cry, but smile quietly in the dark. And may you carry their stories wherever you go. You are now a memory keeper, and the cave will never forget you.